Thank you so much. Thank you, Lynn. And it is a complete honour and a pleasure to be back here in my favourite city and at the great University of Hull, where I was a student from 1984 to 87. And it was a huge honour to be asked to be president of the Philip Larkin Society. As people who know me know that I love Hull, and to have such a fundamental and intense connection with the city via the Philip Larkin Society is a daily joy to me. I've been asked to speak, well, to welcome you today to the second day and to basically open the second day. So this is not going to be, even though I am an English graduate, this is not going to be an academic paper, rather some thoughts about Larkin in particular, but poetry in general, how it can cope with the demands of modern day, the digital era. And whether it's going to battle through, as it were. So I've been thinking about this in preparing these thoughts. And I was looking on Substack, which is a kind of place for essentially sort of retired columnists or columnists who found their usual berths in newspapers as somewhat dwindling. I'm one of these people, and it's a chance for us to write kind of rather terrifyingly without an editor, without anyone to pitch your ideas to, and you just sort of launch off and you think, well, I hope people are going to be interested in what I'm writing about. But I've been in this gig for so long, I kind of I need to do it every week. It's like a sort of a thing, and I'm not alone in here. Anyway, another person on Substack is Sam Leith, the literary critic and writer, and he writes very engagingly about literature. And in his Substack last week, he started talking about Venn diagrams. Obviously, that is interesting because John Venn, again, Hull born and bred, another fantastic export from Hull, the Venn diagrams, and a building here at the university alongside Larkin. And he saw a note where he said the writer of this Substack, not Sam Leith, but this other person, said, I'm increasingly beginning to worry that the Venn diagram of people who write poetry and people who read poetry is basically one circle. And Leith responded by saying the situation is much worse, actually. In his view, it's a circle of people who write poetry containing a much, much smaller circle of people who read poetry. So if that diagram is really the case, then things are bad for the Philip Larkin Society and things are bad for poetry generally. But I sort of wanted to think about whether poetry really was a rapidly declining Venn diagram, and whether the moral panic about people not reading fiction and not reading poetry has any basis on it. And according to something which is called non-examined assessment data, I don't know if any data fiends around here know what NEA data is. Apparently, it's like non-examined assessment data is if I decide to find out how many people in Hull support Hull City, or how many people actually love Hull Kingston Rovers and world champions and all that. Just go out to Cottingham Road and do a kind of vague survey, ask people, and then come back with what you found. That is what non-assessment data is. Anyway, according to non-examined assessment data, 9 to 12% of Americans read a piece of poetry every month. So that is 40 million people. Which is quite good. And in the UK, approximately 25% of young people aged 8 to 18 read a piece of poetry once a month. And in fact, in terms of my own non-examined assessment data, I was on the tube the other day and saw a young woman reading a poem. She was reading The Cold Earth Slept Below. Hands up who knows who that is by. Come on, guys. Who... No. Who wrote the poem called The Cold Earth Slept Below? Okay, I'll give you a clue. His middle name sounds like a sneeze. Shelley. So in the last year, I know, but you all know what his middle name is. Anyway, last year, about over 1 million books of poetry were sold in the UK. How many of those were by Philip Larkin? Well, quite a few, it would seem. About a couple of years ago, his collected poems was ranked the 13th best anthology in sale that year. And in his lifetime, he sold over 100,000 copies of Wits and Weddings. So actually, I think even though there is a slight moral panic about people not reading fiction, about young people particularly not reading books, I'm doing a degree at the moment at Birkbeck University, and I'm obviously the oldest person in the class by some way. And it appears to me that young people aren't reading as many books as you or I might have read when we were that age. But actually, I think that poetry could be the perfect art form for the digital era. I mean, just consider the size of it. It's the size of a poem. It works so brilliantly on Instagram, works so brilliantly on Facebook. You can post a poem. And in fact, I came across a rather anxious thread of people on Substack mourning the demise of the poetry newsletter or the literary magazine, which back in the day had hilarious names like Tray Full of Lab Mice, 13, a newsletter which published only poems of 13 lines, or a newsletter called Giants Play Well in the Drizzle. These newsletters were hand-typed, photocopied, clipped together with staples. You know, there was sort of circulation of maybe 50 or 60 copies. And on this thread that I found, there were people saying, has anyone got any copies of Lab Mice, or has anyone got any copies of Giants Play Well in the Drizzle? Apparently all of them included poems by Charles Bukowski, who always submitted poems to people who asked him. So the thread was full of people saying, can I find a copy of Horse and Dog, which is another hilariously named literary magazine. The thing about those is they're so fragile and they're so fleeting. A bit of paper with only 50 copies of it. Whereas when something's on the internet, it lasts forever, as any friend of Jeffrey Epstein will know. So actually, I'm sure you're all subscribers to the brilliant Tiny and All That Air, which Lynn produces. And the world of the literary magazine has sort of transmuted into the literary podcast. And there are loads of them out there, brilliant poetry ones with as Tiny and All That Air, his analysis of poems and also reading of poems. And there are absolutely hundreds of Poetry Exchange, close readings from the LRB, Poetry Off the Shelf, Frank Skinner's poetry podcast. So there's a lot of noise out there. Does this now mean that Larkin might be lost in the noise of the online world? Well, again, I don't think so, because Larkin is a fantastic brand, as the merch proves, as, just even that, moaning about everyone. Larkin is a great brand because everyone thinks, I don't think he was, but everyone thinks he's ferociously grumpy. And part of his brand is obviously Hull. And, Hull is such a brilliant brand. It's been a very good brand for me. It's been a very good brand for Philip Larkin. It's a very good brand because it's so unusual and because people don't expect it to produce anything. They don't expect someone like John Venn to come from Hull. They don't expect, to give you an example, I give you Robert Aramayo. Who knows who Robert Aramayo is? Right, okay. He's the chap from Hull who won the BAFTA. And I just delighted in the headlines. It was absolutely hilarious. Hull man wins BAFTA. Hull man, Hull-born Robert. It was before his name. It was before the name of the film. It was before the name BAFTA. It was like, I sort of want to say Hull v Hollywood. Hull beats Hollywood. It was every single headline, because it was so unlikely. And I'm giving a talk next week to young people at Winifred O.B.E school. Now, Hull is a low-income city, and Winifred O.B.E is in a low-income place in Hull. But these young people are, their teacher has it's in something called Speakers for Schools, where people go and give talks to state schools and talk to them about their career and job, that sort of thing. And I'm going to talk to these young people. And I was very struck. Ages ago, I gave a talk at the Hull Truck about journalism and about arts journalism in particular, which is my speciality. And I invited questions from the young people who were at this event. And one woman put up her hand. She said, "I really want to be a theatre critic, but I feel ashamed because I have a Hull accent." And I will never forget that. I just thought, that is just awful. And so what I want to say to these young people in Winifred O.B.E, some of whom I'm then taking, I'm in Hull next week because Opera North, which I'm on the board of, is opening the Marriage of Figaro, is bringing the Marriage of Figaro to Hull New Theatre, and it's the first night. And I'm taking 20 of these young people from Winifred O.B.E and a couple of teachers to see this masterpiece. And it'll just be a wonderful thing. I mean, to have this work at Hull New Theatre is just going to be spectacular. It's a great production. I encourage you to go and see it if you're going to be in Hull next week. Anyway, I'm going to talk to them about Robert Aramayo, who also comes from East Hull, and the fact that, life is going to be very good for him because it's so unlikely, because he comes from Hull, and because he's got that banner before him. And Larkin has that too. Just as everyone knew that T.S. Eliot was a banker, everyone knows that Larkin was a librarian, and a librarian in Hull, which is unusual. And Hull has, of course, used Larkin as energetically as Larkin used Hull. Hull really has gone to town on the Larkin trails, obviously toads, the big toads. It's done well, and I know this because I looked after the City of Culture, and we used Larkin shamelessly as part of the promotion, and had a fantastic exhibition here, which I'm sure most of you went to see at the Brynmore Jones. So each has thrived from the association. I don't know if you remember the wonderful valediction for Philip Larkin, published in the LRB 1986 by Clive James. He writes, "Hull stood for England, England for the world, the whole caboodle crammed into one room. Above your desk, all of creation swirled for you to look through with increasing gloom, or so your poems led us to assume." So Larkin's brand, it's Hull, it's the university, it's the library, it's gloominess, and it's a few other things. Which I think will help him manage against the noise and the competing attention seeking from other poets, other podcasts, other Substacks, and all the other digital clutter. I was watching The Chase the other day. Many of you may not watch The Chase because you're too busy reading or doing intellectual things, but if not, I shall tell you that The Chase is ITV's most popular daytime quiz, watched by 5 million people. I know, well, because it's a laugh, and it's hosted by a very engaging quizmaster called Bradley Walsh, where members of the public face a professional quizzer, and they have a multiple choice, and they see who wins, and they play it for money, but it's very engaging and amusing. Anyway, the following question came up. Which poet said, this is Bradley Walsh on ITV in the daytime hosting the Chase, Which poet said, "An alcoholic is someone you don't like who drinks as much as you do"? Was it A, William Wordsworth, B, Dylan Thomas, or C, Philip Larkin? I knew Larkin was going to come up when they asked the question. I thought, oh, Larkin's got to be one of these. And then, so hands up who thinks it was William Wordsworth. I know, I just laugh every time I think about that. Hands up who think it was Dylan Thomas. Hands up who think it was Philip Larkin. Okay. The answer is Dylan Thomas. But the fact that Larkin was on there is very instructive. You know, Ted Hughes wasn't on there. You know, John Betjeman wasn't on there. The fact is that crucial thing is that Larkin's habits, the Larkin-ness of him, the grumpiness of him, the booziness of him, and also his national status, is still there 40 years after his death. He is still big enough to feature on a networked TV show watched by 5 million people, many of whom will be under 25, so young people. So as Clive James wrote about Larkin, but probably didn't consider it with reference to an ITV show, "Your immortality complete at last." There you have it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And
well, thank you, Rosie. We're a pointless household. Can't do the chase as well. He comes up, doesn't he? Larkin, Gav will back me up. Sometimes get some Larkin questions. Thank you. That was lovely, and it sounds like a brilliant event going to the opera next week with the young people. That will change their lives. They'll remember that forever. Yeah. Thank you so much.